Hello everybody, I am Nu-Trix the Synth Guy, and today we're talking about the Roland JD-800. It's a wonderful piece of hardware, but now it's also a wonderful piece of software. Yeah, the Roland company, the Roland group, has released a really cool software synthesizer, the Roland JD-800. It's using basically the same technology you find in the boutique series, like in the D05, for instance, and the same type of logic and circuit emulation. So they mimic every part of the device so that when you play with them, it does react like the original piece of hardware. And even if it's digital, you need to understand that every piece has its own way of reacting, and there's still some analog part at one point, or digital to analog conversion, and also that the digital pieces of 20, 40, years ago are not the same as today, so they don't react the same way unless, you recreate it exactly the same, and that's what they did with the virtual JD-800. So why is it so cool? Well, the JD-800, you need to remember that when this came out, it was a wonderful piece of hardware. Let's go back in time and think about how things evolved through time. At one point, we had analog synthesizers. Everybody was buying analog, and one day we had digital, the DX7, the D50, the M1, all these pieces of hardware. People went like, oh, okay, analog is now not good anymore. Let's get rid of it and let's go to digital. And everybody went digital, and it was the sound of the 80s. But then after one decade of working with a couple of slider, a small screen with just 2 lines of code and just, try to figure out your way around the menus and making sound with it, a lot of people were displeased about, the sound design capacity of these devices. Not that they're not able to do it, but the interface was not, inspiring and helping you create your sound. So what actually happened is that a lot of companies were releasing these software editors. You would have a system exclusive software editor you would see on screen. Basically, it looks like a plugin today, but there's no sound in it. It just sends system exclusive to your hardware, and you can change the sound in it, like a software editor. That's what it is. But still, it's not the same thing as having the real, box in front of you with all the panels and be able to move all the sounds and make it into what you want just by looking at a panel. So when the JD-800 came out, it was like, wow, we have that approach that we saw in the analog synthesizers that kind of got lost with digital, and now it's coming back with the JD-800. So when this was out, people were like going, oh, wow, this is great. And it sounded good, The JD-800 is using basically the same logic as you would find in the D50. So it's linear arithmetic synthesis, using PCMs, combining up to 4 layers of these PCMs, and each of them having a complete set of control, like it would be a separate synth. Another way of looking at it is like having 4 different synthesizers into one single patch. So when you play a sound, you can play 4 different oscillators. All of them, they're not oscillators, they're wave generators because they're recorded sounds. They're PCM, pulse code, what's PCM stand for? Pulse code modulation. Yeah, that's it. They're using the audio recording, these samples, but that the company made, so you cannot put your own samples in it. There were the option of having cards at the back and adding cards to add more sound, so more waveform to play from and patches to use them. So it was possible to expand this with cards like what's the card? Physically, it would look like this. Physically, it would be a card that would actually have this type of approach. Not exactly this one, but it would be something like that. And you would put that in the back, and you have one would be smaller with the sounds, the PCMs, and the other one would be the patches, the values of all the parameters of your sound, basically. And on top of that, they have 24 voices to play with. Now, the voices in this case, you need to understand that every voice basically triggers a sample. So if you play with 4 layers on one sound, every one key triggers 4 voices. So one note is basically 4 voices. You get 24 voices. So if you play 2 notes, you're playing 8 voices, and so on. So if you have complex sounds using 4 voices, the amount of notes you can play actually drops really rapidly. Keep that in mind that the original would also play, the original JD-800 would also play multiple channels. So it would have a multi-kit. You would have 5 different channels to play. So 5 different sounds could be played through MIDI, plus a drum, mostly percussion, electronic percussion sounds, but you could also add, like I said earlier, a card would be the dance or the drum dance or the drum electro or a different type of sound you could put in. And honestly, it's kind of sad that that expansion is not part of the package, because these drum were fun. I remember the electronic dance drum, they were just like really cool. And I say I remember them because in 93 to 94, I was in school learning music production at a school in Montreal called Musique Technique. And we had one of these, the JD. Actually, we had more. I think we had 4 of the JD-800, and it was one of the devices that we learned how to, to create with. And I loved it because it was so cool to be able to have access to everything in front of you. It was just obvious. You saw the whole sound in front of you, and the power that you have in this synthesizer is really super cool. So I will actually go into the plugin, do a tour of it, and show you how to approach it, because it's different, kind of. Let's do this. Just a quick tour of the interface. You've got the keyboard at the bottom. That's pretty obvious. You have layers here, an active section. And we'll go back to this, but at the top left, you've got layer and tones, and layers and active, the tones basically. And this is really where you're going to be doing a lot of work when you're moving between all of the different parts that you want to use to create your sound. Palette is also very useful, but let's just a quick tour of the synthesis. You've got 2 LFOs. You have a wave generator, that section here. So everything that is kind of the oscillator, if you want. You have the pitch envelope that is linked to the oscillator, the wave generator. You have a filter, which is a multi-mode filter. You got low pass, mid pass, high pass, and you've got the envelope to control it. Same thing with the envelope here, the envelope for the amplitude, and then you've got the information about the amplitude on. So it's very traditional in the way it's structured. The envelope is a lot more powerful than an ADSR. That's one of the cool things. But then the really fun part is the fact that you have 4 tones. Now, these are recorded sounds, so they don't have to be just about like piano, bass, and drums or whatever it is, or keyboard or violin. They can also be just extra stuff, like stuff that you don't play, but stuff that you hear, like from a guitar player when he slides the strings or plucking something. And then when you combine all of that, it makes a more credible instrument if you want to create acoustic instruments. So I would not say that this is made to create acoustics, but you have some cool, like, I would say electric pianos. But this was really known for stuff like, that's a really rich bass. But if you look at the tones, you're hearing 4 of them. Let's actually just listen to them. That's tone A. That's tone B. Tone C is kind of a guitar slap or bass slap. And another tone. And if you have 4 of them together, and they don't have to react the same way, because what you see on screen, LFOs, envelopes, pitch, filter, all of that is for 1 tone. You have 4 of that. So basically you have 4 synthesizers playing at the same time to create your sound. So that's an example of a bass. Of course, the first one is kind of kind of a rich, complex sound. Pad. Let's go here. If you want to browse, you can just click and move here, or if you want to see the whole list of patches in one sweep, you click on patch and you've got the whole thing here. This is really cool. I mean, it sounds really lush. And it's also because of the effects. Quickly, if you want to see where the effects are, if you click on the bottom right, you've got common and effect. Common, when you click on it, you got the section that is the common section, and the rest of it is basically the effects. You've got 4 effects at the top and 3 at the bottom. There's 2 groups, basically distortion, phaser, spectrum, and answer. And you can change the order. You can move this. You click on this one and you move it where you want. You can move it down. You can move them within the group A. And same thing here. You can move it between the group B, and to turn it on, basically on or off, and the value for each of them. And they're really cool sounding. So let's actually go back to tone, and this is the tone. So one of the problem that you might have in this synthesizer, it's basically how you manage the layers, basically the tones layers here, because it's easy to get lost in this. Let me explain. When you look at this, you've got, of course, you've got the envelopes, you know, filters. I'm not going to explain all of this because it's, I mean, filters, envelopes, and all that stuff. I think you will get it quickly. We can say that the envelopes are more complex because you've got time 1, level 1, time 2, level 2, time 3, level 3, time 4, level 4. Okay, that's way more powerful than ADSR because the attack doesn't have to go from 0 to 100. It can be from 0 to 0. You go, what? Yeah, you can be to 0 to 0. So basically you can say my attack will be a waiting moment. I'm going to hold it down until I get to time 2. Then I'm going to open up. So you can have 2 sounds because, again, you're working in layers. First sound could start right away with an envelope that opens right away, where the second layer would be an envelope that, instead of opening right away, is waiting the same amount of time, but it goes from 0 to 0 in that time. So it will actually wait that time before it gets to the second level and then start the time 2 to level 2. So you need to think differently when you're using this, but it's really powerful. It's really cool. Really powerful in the same, also that you've got velocity. So as you press harder, you have a change in the level of the envelopes. And there's also time velocity. So if you press harder, the time will go longer. So as you press harder or shorter, depending on what you want. So that would be also logical if you play on some instrument. If you press harder, it could mimic the fact that you actually are hitting harder with your bow. If you press softer, it will be like a soft attack of the bow on the string, for example. And the time key follow is that as you go up the keys, for example, the length of the envelope could be shorter, and as you go down the keys, the length of the envelope will be longer, like, let's say, a piano, for example. It's possible. And that's the same logic for the pitch envelope, the TVF envelope, and the TV envelope. It's the same logic. It has these functions. One thing you have to verify, though, is that when you look at the pitch envelope, it's different. You go from low, actually minus something, to plus something. So that's the only one when you can go down or up here. The other one, they just go from 0 to 100%, you know. But this one, you can go minus because you can go lower in pitch to higher in pitch. So you can go lower than the key and then straighten up on the key, or going from higher than the key and stay on the key. What you don't have in this is stuff like cross modulation, pulse width modulation, sync modulation, because it's a PCM and at the time it was not possible, or they didn't put it in. But it's still a really cool synthesizer. There's something great about the pitch random. Let's say we go to, we're going to go to utilities, to initialize the sound. I'm just going to have a new sound, okay? When you click here, you can actually load each of the samples, each of the PCM, one at a time, and just pick another one and decide until you get the one raw sound you want to start from. That's pretty, I mean, you've got a lot of them. You got 108, and you see that some of them are just like, so put that in context of going from analog to just digital. So you're still in the same digital sounding capacity, but with the feeling of a synthesizer that is from the analog days, basically. One cool thing, let's say I'm going to go back to Synth Saw. Let's say we put some random in it. If I put too much, what you're going to get is every time you press a key, it's just going to go randomly. I say what's hard to play, you know. I'm playing a riff. They just go everywhere. So if you bring it down to maybe, I don't know, 20. So it's not off. It's just slightly random. It becomes interesting when you combine it with another one. Let's say tone B. So it's 2 times the same sound, 2 times the same sawtooth, but one of them, the first one, is randomly changing slightly in pitch. So when you get is a little bit chorus that is not always the same. Well, that's pretty cool. So that's kind of the logic between how you want to use this. Another thing that is important here is you got also key follow. That is really a key interesting feature in here. You can add key follow of 200%, which means that when you go high up the keys, you're going 2 octave in the space of 1. So every key, I'm hearing the 2 of them. Actually, I'm going to turn that one off. See, you're playing 2 octave instead of 1. If you put it at 0, which is about this one here, so it's going to be, all the keys are the same. Now we go, why? Maybe it's for sound effects. Maybe you're using this as a sound design engine to do sound effects, and then you don't really care about which key you're going to play. You just want it to sound always exactly the same pitch. Or it's like I said earlier, some of the sound you're going to use in there could be to trigger some stuff. Like if you play really loud, you want to hear the hammer of the keys, you know, the hammer of the piano sound. And then you would have something that might be the same type of sound of the hammer hitting your keys, your strings. And you don't want the pitch to change. So you put it at 0, or maybe you put it at 10%. So it's slightly different. And you can also go the other way, minus 100. So as you go up the keys, it goes down in pitch. That's just weird. But you can actually use this again. Think of it as layers. And that's where it becomes really interesting, because the way you combine them can create very complex and weird stuff with this. So where do we get lost when we work with this is the fact that you're working on tone A, for example. And then we go back here and say, well, tone A, this is where they're active. This is where you hear them. But hey, I said active. It's written active here. That's where I don't agree in the case of calling it active here, but I'm not the one designing this synthesizer. The way this works is when you say layers here, when you click on them, you turn them on. The one that are on the red here, they're actually active. They're the one you're listening to. When you click active, it's the active panel. That's what you see here. That's the one being edited. So if I switch values here, I don't know, this one, that one, I don't really care. I just want to have some movement. If I click back to this one, you're going to see these are changing because it's just a different memory of the patch. The layer doesn't have the same presets or values than you have on the A and B. Okay, where we get misled sometimes is like, okay, I'm working on this, I want to solo in on B, so I'm going to turn off the other one. I hear what I'm doing with B. Oh, this is wonderful, wonderful sound. Let's keep that. And then I go back to A. I want to listen to A. Okay, A, I'm going to change the pitch, and I start editing it. And I go, well, I don't hear anything. Well, I want to cut the frequencies. I don't hear anything. What's happening? Well, look at this here. I'm still editing tone B while I'm listening to tone A. And that's where we all get confused, because at one point I'm not listening to the one I'm actually editing. You go, hey, the software doesn't work. The synthesizer's, wrong. It's not. I'm just not doing it the right way. So if I'm editing B, I need to verify I actually have B in the layer active. So, oh, that's the one I just did without knowing what I was doing because I didn't listen to it. Well, that's a weird one. So that's one way to, really grasp the concept of layers. But at the same time, there's a quick way. Let's say you edit something. Let's pick something that is already there, like, I don't know, let's go back to Sweeper. Okay, if you look at the graphic here, I know I've got 4 different tones active. But let's say I want to play with the filter. Right now, if I play on it, I'm going to edit C and D because the 2 of them are lit here. I'm editing 2 of them. Let's say I want to just edit that one. I'll open this one up. So the changes I'm doing right now is just on B. You see it here. But if you look at this section here, palette, you see tone A, B, C, and D. Well, tone A, B, and C, and D, what you have is you have the 4 layers here for the one that is active on screen. The TVF, cutoff filter right now. If I press on something else, resonance, now these 4 are editing the resonance. What's cool is I can say, well, I want to change this. You look at the screen, it changes here. And I can edit them separately without having to change anything else. Go back to cutoff here. Well, I can now edit the 4 cutoffs without having to switch between active layers. So that's the quick way to be able to edit the 4 layers without having to move between them. So it's really well thought of in that case. I would actually think of using this with a keyboard that has at least 4 faders, and you can assign the 4 to the palette, and then it's kind of logical. Click on the one you want, and then you can control the 4 of them at the same time. So it's just a cool little synth. It's just a really powerful synth. I like the sound of this thing. I need to play you some of my favorite stuff in this thing. Of course, I just played a couple of them already, but the one I really like are just the guitars in this. Pretty sure that a band called Prodigy used this in some production at one point. There's another one that is also pretty cool, the Velo Crunch. And this is because the effects are really cool. They sound really great. And again, if you go back to the effect, you've got this section. Remember that? That's what you hear. Just a cool sounding one. Keep in mind that also when you combine all your sound together, the layers together, you've got a key range you can control here. You can say that I just want to hear tone A from C1 to C, I don't know, C minus 1 to C3. Then you can change that, you know, and basically just go in and go C3, enter. Limited key range for that one. And you can do that for each of the sound and then kind of split your keyboard in different sections if that's what you want to have. Now, if at any point you go, okay, how does this work? I don't really know why delay, fade, rate, how does it work, or the different options here, or the offset. Well, go in menu, and in menu you've got help, and that's where you can get a PDF, the whole PDF that shows all the options, each of the buttons, what they do, and take the time because it's a really cool synth. It's really cool for that. There's a zoom option here to zoom out and zoom in, so to make it fit to the size of your screen. So that's really useful because we don't have all the same size of a screen. That's one thing. And let's go back here. Also, there's something for the limit of the notes. If you find that your computer has difficulty playing it, you can limit, voice limit heavy. So it's going to limit to the amount of notes you're going to play. It's kind of weird that you don't have a number. Why not say I want to limit it to 2 voice, 5 voice, 4 voice, whatever it is, but whatever, it works. You also have a compact layout. You have 4 palette controls here for the level, the cutoff, the resonance, and the attack. So really quick access to make it, work. And you just click on the patch and you select the one you want. So basically, I think this is just for somebody who just want to load a sound and play without touching the synthesis at all. But you're missing the whole point of having this synth. This synth is just a cool one to play with, and I really believe you should be in the original layout. Now, I think that's enough for today. There's a lot of stuff I just gave you. If you want to know more about this, I could actually do a couple of videos about designing your own sound with it, because I did teach the synthesizers in the 90s. Actually, yeah. Late 90s, early 2000, I did teach the synthesizer. So I could do something like, hey, let's build a spaceship landing, alien coming out, and when you release your finger, it has to go back up, or whatever. put your question below. Put your if you want to have sound design on this, put the request down here. And I think I'm going to do another video where I just play the sounds, and then I might compare them to the one from the model expansion, because this is not the Xenology technology. This is the digital circuit behavior, which is basically what you have in the Boutique series. So I don't know if Roland plans to have a JD-800 Boutique model. I don't expect it, because if you look at the amount of buttons you've got on this, there's no way it fits into the size of a small Boutique synthesizer. I just don't see it happening. But it's the same technology. Again, further down the road, basically. I like it. I'm just happy because I've got an emotional, souvenirs of playing with the JD-800 and using it in my 90s days, and I'm just happy they released it. So have fun, try it out, play with it, and if you have any question about sound design, put your question down. I might do a couple of tutorials how to make your own sound with it, a complete design for one sound, for example. That's it. Stay safe, make more music. See ya.